This documentary explores the life of Benito Mussolini, the founder of Italian Fascism and dictator of Italy from 1922 to 1943. Through rare archival footage, historical documents, and expert narration, it traces his transformation from a rebellious socialist journalist into one of the most controversial and consequential figures of the 20th century. It examines his rise to power amid post-World War I turmoil, the consolidation of a totalitarian regime, his alliance with Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany, and his dramatic downfall during the final days of World War II. Along the way, the film explores how fascist ideology reshaped Italy's political system, society, and culture, and how its legacy continues to influence discussions about authoritarianism and nationalism around the world. Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini was born on July 29, 1883, in the small town of Dovia di Predapio in northern Italy. His father, Alessandro Mussolini, was a blacksmith and a passionate socialist who admired revolutionary leaders. His mother, Rosa Maltoni, was a devout Catholic and a schoolteacher who valued discipline and education. From an early age, young Benito was exposed to two contrasting influences: the fiery radicalism of his father and the moral structure and literacy encouraged by his mother. These opposing forces would echo throughout his life. As a child, Mussolini was known for his intelligence and temper. Teachers described him as bright but defiant. He frequently clashed with authority figures and was expelled from more than one school for violent behavior. Despite his rebelliousness, he excelled academically and eventually qualified as a school teacher. Yet he had little interest in a quiet provincial life. Drawn to political activism and inspired by socialist ideals, Mussolini left Italy in 1902 to avoid military service and to seek opportunities in Switzerland. During his years in Switzerland, Mussolini immersed himself in socialist circles. He worked various manual jobs and spent time reading the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and other revolutionary thinkers. He also encountered anarchists and syndicalists whose ideas emphasized direct action and mass mobilization. These formative experiences shaped his early worldview. He became known as a passionate speaker and writer, advocating for workers' rights and class struggle. However, his radical rhetoric often brought him into conflict with authorities, leading to arrests and deportations. By 1904, Mussolini returned to Italy and eventually completed his military service. He resumed his political activism and began writing for socialist newspapers. His sharp pen and charismatic oratory quickly elevated him within the ranks of the Italian Socialist Party. In 1912, he became editor of the party's newspaper, Avanti, significantly increasing its circulation and influence. At this stage, Mussolini was a committed socialist who opposed imperialism and war. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 marked a turning point. While the Italian Socialist Party maintained a stance of neutrality, Mussolini broke ranks. He began advocating for Italy's entry into the war, arguing that participation would accelerate social transformation and national renewal. This dramatic shift led to his expulsion from the Socialist Party. Undeterred, Mussolini founded his own newspaper, Il Popolo d'Italia, which promoted interventionism and nationalist ideas. His rhetoric increasingly emphasized strength, unity, and the necessity of violence in shaping history. Italy entered World War I in 1915. On the side of the Allies, Mussolini enlisted in the army and served on the front lines until he was wounded in 1917. The war left Italy economically strained and socially divided. Although technically on the winning side, many Italians felt betrayed by the post-war settlement, believing the country had not received the territorial gains it had been promised. Economic hardship, unemployment, strikes, and fears of socialist revolution created a climate of instability. It was in this atmosphere of crisis that Mussolini saw opportunity. In 1919, Mussolini founded the Fasci di Combattimento, a political movement composed largely of war veterans, nationalists, and disillusioned citizens. The term fascio referred to a bundle of rods bound together around an axe, an ancient Roman symbol of authority and unity. Mussolini drew heavily on Roman imagery to evoke a sense of national pride and destiny. At first, the movement struggled electorally. However, its paramilitary wing, known as the Black Shirts, used violence and intimidation against socialist organizations, trade unions, and political opponents. The early 1920s were marked by escalating violence between fascist squads and left-wing groups. Industrialists and landowners, fearful of socialist uprisings, increasingly viewed Mussolini as a bulwark against revolution. His movement promised order, national strength, and a restoration of Italian greatness. By 1922, political paralysis and economic turmoil had weakened Italy's liberal government. Mussolini capitalized on this instability with the March on Rome in October 1922. Though the event was more theatrical than militarily decisive, it demonstrated fascist resolve. King Victor Emmanuel III, unwilling to risk civil war, invited Mussolini to form a government. At the age of 39, Mussolini became the youngest prime minister in Italian history. Initially, Mussolini led a coalition government and operated within constitutional limits. However, he quickly moved to consolidate power. The Acerbo Law of 1923 ensured that the party with the largest share of votes would gain a parliamentary majority. In the 1924 elections, amid widespread intimidation and violence, the Fascist Party secured control. The murder of socialist leader Giacomo Matteotti, who had publicly denounced electoral fraud, triggered a political crisis. Rather than resign, Mussolini assumed responsibility and began dismantling democratic institutions. Between 1925 and 1926, Mussolini established a dictatorship. Opposition parties were banned, independent newspapers were shut down, and political dissent was suppressed. A secret police force, the OVRA, monitored and persecuted critics. Mussolini adopted the title Il Duce, meaning the leader. Fascism became the state ideology, emphasizing loyalty, discipline, and the supremacy of the nation over the individual. The fascist regime sought to control nearly every aspect of Italian life through propaganda, education reforms, and youth organizations such as the Opera Nazionale Balilla. The state aimed to cultivate a new generation of loyal citizens. Public rallies, grand architecture, and carefully staged spectacles reinforced the image of Mussolini as a dynamic and infallible leader. Radio broadcasts and newsreels spread his speeches across the country. Economically, Mussolini pursued policies intended to promote self-sufficiency or autarky. Campaigns such as the Battle for Grain aimed to increase domestic production. The regime also launched ambitious public works projects, draining marshlands and constructing infrastructure. While these initiatives reduced unemployment and projected an image of progress, They often masked underlying inefficiencies and economic weaknesses. In foreign policy, Mussolini sought to expand Italy's influence and revive the glory of the Roman Empire. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia, one of the few remaining independent African nations. The campaign was brutal, involving the use of chemical weapons. Although the League of Nations imposed sanctions, they proved ineffective. The conquest was celebrated domestically as a triumph, bolstering Mussolini's prestige. During the 1930s, Mussolini's relationship with Adolf Hitler deepened. Initially cautious of Nazi ambitions, Mussolini gradually aligned Italy with Germany. The two regimes shared ideological similarities, including authoritarianism and aggressive nationalism. In 1936, they formed the Rome-Berlin Axis. Italy later joined Germany in supporting Francisco Franco during the Spanish Civil War. In 1938, Mussolini introduced racial laws targeting Italy's Jewish population, stripping them of civil rights and excluding them from public life. These laws marked a stark departure from earlier Italian policies and reflected growing Nazi influence. They also revealed the increasingly radical nature of fascist ideology. When World War II erupted in 1939, Mussolini initially declared Italy non-belligerent. However, in June 1940, believing Germany was on the verge of victory, he entered the war on the Axis side. Italy's military campaigns in North Africa, Greece, and elsewhere exposed significant weaknesses. Repeated defeats undermined public confidence and strained resources. By 1943, Allied forces had invaded Sicily, and discontent within Italy reached a breaking point. On July 25, 1943, the Fascist Grand Council voted to remove Mussolini from power. King Victor Emmanuel III ordered his arrest. However, in September 1943, German commandos rescued Mussolini in a daring raid. He was installed as head of a puppet state in northern Italy, known as the Italian Social Republic. The final months of Mussolini's life were marked by chaos and collapse. As Allied forces advanced and partisan resistance intensified, his regime disintegrated. In April 1945, attempting to flee to Switzerland, Mussolini was captured by Italian partisans. On April 28, 1945, he was executed. His body was displayed publicly in Milan, symbolizing the violent end of fascist rule. Mussolini's legacy remains deeply controversial. To some contemporaries, he represented order and national revival during a time of crisis. To others, he embodied repression, aggression, and catastrophic miscalculation. His regime curtailed freedoms, persecuted minorities, and aligned Italy with a destructive war that cost countless lives. The ideology of fascism, with its emphasis on authoritarian leadership, ultranationalism, and suppression of dissent, left a lasting imprint on political thought. Scholars continue to debate its origins, appeal, and enduring relevance. Mussolini's rise illustrates how economic instability, social unrest, and political fragmentation can create fertile ground for authoritarian movements. This documentary invites viewers to consider not only the life of one man, but also the broader historical forces that shaped his era. It asks how charismatic leadership, propaganda, and the promise of national greatness can transform democratic societies. It reflects on the human cost of totalitarian ambition and the importance of safeguarding democratic institutions. Through the story of Benito Mussolini, from his turbulent youth to his dramatic downfall, we confront a chapter of history that continues to resonate. His life serves as a reminder of the fragility of political systems and the consequences of unchecked power. By examining the past with clarity and critical insight, we gain a deeper understanding of the challenges that confront societies in times of uncertainty.